Let's begin by saying hello, everybody, and welcome along again to a class called Equanimity, Caring for All Beings Equally. So we begin by doing a short meditation. We'll take refuge together and say those preliminary prayers, and then we'll actually begin the class. So please get comfortable in your seat, which means sort of, make sure that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. Place your hands wherever you feel they're most comfortable. And you can close your eyes or keep them open, whatever suits you. So when you're comfortable in your posture, become aware of the feelings and movements within the body that take place whenever you inhale and exhale breath. You're breathing normally and naturally. And the body moves whenever you inhale or exhale. And you are aware of the movements. And while you're breathing normally and naturally, the body is beginning to relax, and the mind is focused upon that process of relaxation. There's a state of ease that you are becoming familiar with. And for the body and the mind in a state of ease, it's very easy to imagine the presence of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in the space above you. So these are the enlightened beings who have our best interests at heart. And we're going to rely upon them to help us put an end to the suffering of ourselves and every other living being, and to deliver us and everyone else into the highest, most stable form of happiness there is. So let's take refuge in them, the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the deities, the Dharma protectors. We'll take refuge in them, put an end to our suffering, help others do the same, and deliver all good qualities. So please join me in reciting the refuge prayer, which is complemented with the mind of enlightenment. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So in response to this wish of ours, lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha and they wash over us. And everything that is created suffering for ourselves is washed away. And the potential for being stably happy and content is revealed. You see that this is just a clear and open mind. And then we recollect the 4 immeasurable thoughts. And we can recite this brief prayer. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is without suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment for friends and the bias of hatred for enemies. And in response to this prayer of ours, again, lights and nectars pour out of the heart of the Buddha, and they wash over us and over all the beings surrounding us. And the light and nectar reveals these 4 boundless thoughts to ourselves as just reflections of mind's nature. So while we're in front of this vast field for accumulating merit, we can recite the 7-limb prayer. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions, accumulated since beginning this time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. And now we'll offer a mandala with the understanding that this will provide resources throughout countless lives while we make attempts to attain enlightenment. It'll also stop our greed and miserliness, the clinging we have to our body, our conceptions of true existence, and to the merit to be truly ours. So let's offer the mandala, saying, this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnayatayami. So I've released the mandala and the Buddha has accepted it, and he looks directly at us and smiles at us. And we look up into his eyes and we feel accepted and at ease. And then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart and goes through space and comes to abide and rest above the crown of your head, facing in the same direction you are. The emanation descends, entering the crown of your head and coming down through your body, and comes to rest at the level of your heart, whereby the radiance of the Buddha's body begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin into the 10 directions of space, filling space completely. So that wherever living beings exist within space, they are touched by that light and utterly transformed into the fully awakened state of enlightenment. And they are no different than you, and there's no difference between yourself and they. In fact, all ideas of self and other have completely vanished, and we just rest in this light. And from the very edges of space, the light begins to withdraw and it re-enters your heart. And you feel yourself embodied, sitting on your seat, and you're breathing normally and naturally. And you understand that what we've just done has been on the level of imagination and has placed an imprint upon your mind, a cause for enlightenment to actually take place. And you rejoice in that. You're pleased, and you breathe in deeply through your nostrils and exhale through your open mouth. And allow your eyes to flutter open till you find yourself in your seat and in front of your screen. Okay, so we'll begin the actual course now. So we've had 2 lessons on this topic, and these are some of the things we've gone through. We looked first of all at different types of equanimity. So we know there are at least there's 10. You can divide them into 6, but mainly we really spoke about 3 of them. We talked about the equanimity of feeling, the virtuous mental factor of equanimity, and then immeasurable equanimity. And we looked at how they functioned. We also looked at our uncertainty. So uncertainty referred to the categorization of people as friends, enemies, and strangers. And we saw that this categorization was highly unstable and highly subjective. So that friends, enemies, and strangers could change. The categories could change in this life and in future lives. Then we looked at something called mere equanimity. So this is the equanimity where we develop our emotions so that they're equal regarding others. And we also looked at being the same, in the sense that we are the same and that we lack control over ourselves and experience suffering. We are all subject to impermanence and death. And every one of us lacks or is without an inherent nature. So in these ways, we're all the same. And I've drawn upon these resources for the previous classes and for the class today. Now, last week we did quite a lot of meditations, and we'll do a few more today. And a lot of them are taken from the book called Widening the Circle of Love by the Dalai Lama. There are also there's really good meditations actually in all of these books. But some of them have sort of impacted me a bit more strongly than others. And sometimes you find it's just a line, they say, just one word, one sentence. And you can find you can just rest your mind on that and allow the meaning of it to sort of descend into your consciousness. Today, like I said, we're just going to briefly review, and mainly we've sort of done a lot of that already. And then we're going to talk about what's called the uncommon Mahayana equanimity. So we'll have a look how this how equanimity can be developed through the review. So there's only a couple of slides here, but let's have a look at this. So this is one of the ways of becoming familiar with equanimity, and this is how it's put out in the what's called the 4 immeasurables. So we just recited the 4 immeasurables about a couple of minutes ago, and we didn't say it like this. We said it a little bit differently. And when we said it differently, we began with love. Then we went to immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and then immeasurable equanimity. So that's a very brief way you can do it, and that's the way we did it. So in that one, equanimity comes at the end. While in the long version, like this one here, equanimity comes at the very beginning. So when we recite that the short prayer and equanimity is at the end, it's really emphasizing our wish that others enjoy the peace and freedom that comes about when we remove our attachment to friends, anger towards enemies, and apathy towards strangers. But when we put equanimity first, like here, this long version becomes a synopsis of the method for generating bodhicitta called the 7 cause and effect instructions. So when we cultivate equanimity at the beginning like this is our idea to pacify our attachment, animosity and apathy, which often are the way we react to others. And you can see here that this verse has got the 4 parts. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings would abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This is what we call the wish. May they abide in this way. This is the aspiration. Thirdly, the resolution. I shall cause them to abide in this way. So here you can see, now we're taking on this responsibility, Mahayana business. And we know that we need a help to do this. We can't do this on our own. So we're asking, please, Guru, our teachers, the Buddha himself, the spiritual lineage, inspire me through your teachings to be able to do this. And saying this says equanimity is referring to both equanimity towards others and towards ourselves. We want others to have states of equanimity, but we want to have it ourselves, so we have a mind that's equanimous towards others. And this is called, like I said, the immeasurable impartiality or immeasurable equanimity. And here I've just put up a slide, the next one, to show you the differences between this style, the style of developing equanimity within the 6 causes and 1 effect, and what we're going to be talking about today, the practices of equalizing and exchanging self with others. So here, when it's the way we just talked about, the long one, we're trying to develop this feeling of an equal emotion regarding others, and we can do that using the 6 causes and 1 effect method. There's another method, and we're going to talk about that today. It's called the uncommon Mahayana method. So this here is a Mahayana method, and this one is the uncommon Mahayana method, equalizing self with others. And here it's about a feeling that there's no difference between ourselves and others. So I'll just elaborate a little on the difference here. So the meditation to equalize self and others differs.
So Eddie, just stop the share while you stop the. Yeah, that's it.
It differs from the equanimity previously explained. So as I said before, the first one overcomes emotional reactions of attachment and animosity and indifference with regard to friends, enemies, and strangers. That's what we talked about a lot last week, and that's to do with that first slide. So it steers us towards having an unbiased openness towards these different groups of people. Whereas the meditation on equalizing self and others overcomes something a bit deeper. Our tendency to consider ourselves more valuable and important than other sentient beings.
So Eddie, can I just jump in and just clarify if I've got this right? So the first one is like having no bias or favoritism. So it's equalizing so you don't have racism or sexism or ageism or any of those things towards people. And then
No.
no,
It's to
and
stop the
this and
attachment, aversion, and indifference, not ageism and all these other things. It's to stop the emotional reactivity of having attachment, aversion, and to those other categories you might call them, the age, the old, or
right,
the different races.
okay. So the emotional reactivity. So we still see those categories, but we don't have the emotional reactivity.
That's right.
Okay, and then the second one is where we feel others are just like us.
Yeah, we are just like them. They are just like us.
Okay,
We are the same. Yeah. So the meditation of equalizing self with others um, is to bring about a deep conviction that we and others are fundamentally equal in wanting happiness and freedom from suffering. Whereas the previous one, I said, just level the playing ground of friends, enemies, and strangers. So in brief, I'll just go back now to. So in brief, the phrase equalizing and equalizing self and others refers to the practice of reflecting upon the equality of oneself and others and having a natural and spontaneous wish to enjoy happiness and avoid suffering. And there's a way of learning how to do this, or meditating, that was taught to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and many of the other lamas within the Gelugpa lineage by one of His Holiness's teachers, Khabjang Trajang Rinpoche. And so that's what we're going to go through today. You can find all these meditations in a book called A Path to Bliss by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So let's, and I'll bring it up and then say something. So uncommon Mahayana equanimity of equalizing and exchanging self for others. And it's sort of made up of two major parts, and this is what they are. We look at it from the relative point of view, and we can do it in two ways, from the point of view of others and from your own point of view. And this is what we're going to focus on today. Whereas next week, we're going to have a look at it from the deepest point of view. So this is conventional. Here we're moving a little bit more towards the ultimate truth. And I wanted to do it this way because there's a lot of information to take in. And maybe I just thought it'd be easier if we just go on the conventional way first. And next week we'd come to the ultimate and the tantric perspectives on how we can look at equanimity. So each of these points has three other points. So we go from the point of view of others, we've got three sort of statements. From our own point of view, there's another three statements. And what we take from it, we just sort of, each three statements bring us to a conclusion. And it's the conclusion that we try to hold our mind upon. We go through and go, oh my God, it means this. And we just stop there and let what that meaning is sort of sink into ourselves. From His Holiness's book, The Path to Bliss, he says, so like he says, got 3 points here from the point of view of others, 3 from our own, and when we come to the deepest point of view, is another 3 points and a conclusion drawn. So His Holiness says, this 9-round meditation is comprised of training the mind in equanimity with a mental outlook based on the dual nature of things and events, the conventional and the ultimate. The first, as you can see, is divided into 2 sections, one from the viewpoint of others and one from oneself. So let's go and have a look at the relative point of view, and we'll look at three aspects of it, the conclusion, and then we'll move on to our own point of view. So here's the first point. I'll just say a few things first, and then I'll put that next to the actual thing to hold your mind onto. So from the point of view of others, so we are equal from the perspective of conventional truth. So these reasons, what we're going to go through, are not going into the deeper point of view, but just on the level of appearances. So the three reasons from the viewpoint of others examines others and considers whether there's really any difference between them and ourselves. So it begins by saying, look, everyone equally wants happiness, and there isn't anybody that wants even the slightest form of suffering. Now, you can check this out for yourself. It's great to do this. It's just next time you see a friend or anybody else and say, hey, would you like to experience some suffering? And you're not going to find anybody go, oh, yeah. Not even the slightest little bit. Everybody goes, we've all got aversion to it. But if you ask, and would you really like to be a bit happier than what you are? And most people are going to go, yeah, of course, of course. So there we go. Ah, there it is. It's right there. This is true, this statement. We're the same. Yeah. So everybody equally wants happiness, and no one wants to experience suffering. Says, not only do all 6 classes of sentient beings, so now we've got the humans, the 2 types of godlike beings, we've got the animals, hungry ghosts, and the beings in the hell realms. Every one of these beings, none of them wants to experience any form of suffering. So we can see here that within each person's heart, within each person's deepest mind state, we all have the same wish. So this is what we've got to sort of remember. Wow, we are the same. We are equal insofar as we have a natural wish to avoid suffering. So here's a little kicker that comes with that. This is a little one, isn't it? No point in being prejudiced. If we are actually the same like this, we can't be sort of thinking, but yeah, but I'm more important than you. We can't be prejudiced in that way. This is what it's sort of pointing out to us, and that we are at present prejudiced in that way. But that prejudice makes no sense. So we have to sort of acknowledge that and sort of let that go when we see the sameness of ourselves and others. Is that sort of okay with everybody? How do you feel about that? You recognize there is a sense of prejudice already, that we do see ourselves as being different than others, and that our happiness is more important?
Yeah, there's just a natural bias there, isn't there?
That's right.
Just
Yeah,
that comes from not investigating it.
yeah, that's right.
And then we can investigate it and come to this conclusion, but there's still emotionally something that goes up in arms and goes, but, what about
Yeah,
me?
yes. Well, see that, but that's really tackled in next week, because the me that makes us so different than others is one that seems to us to be inherently established, a real me.
Eddie, I think it starts with self-grasping and self-cherishing, but I don't think for me, it's not limited to that. And I
No,
think there's something beyond that, but at the very heart of it, it starts with my own self-grasping, my own self-cherishing, and then goes beyond that, where I start to believe that you are not me.
yeah,
That
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
because of
that's
your
right.
color of your hair or the color of your skin or your religion or the way you talk or any of those things.
No, it's even, yeah, it's even deeper than that, isn't it? It's like you and I are really completely different. And we grasp it ourselves to be that way. We believe that. That's what the grasping is sort of getting at. We are different, completely different. But there are differences, of course, between ourselves and others. But here we're trying to look at so what we hold in common. We're not saying there are no differences whatsoever. We're just saying in this thing, in terms of our happiness and suffering, we are the same.
And so, Eddie, this thing, our happiness and suffering, is like the most fundamental level, whereas like whether we like this food or that food really doesn't matter whether we're the same or not. But this is like the crucial thing.
Yeah, this is very deep, and like Michael was saying, from, or at least intimating that as soon as we have this deep belief that we are different, that we're not the same, then from that, like I said, the biases arise.
Eddie, and I think for me, the fundamental word from the point of view of others is other. You are other. You're not just different from me. You are other.
Other. This is right. And this is what we should try this out in our own lived experience, isn't it? It is like that. They are you, and like you say, anyone who's not you is other, right? And that other is very different than me.
Eddie, yes, I think I agree with what Michael said. Every time we put others in the category of the other, we can demonize them and do.
And we do.
Worldwide.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's what follows. And we see in our lived lives that there are plenty of people who it's advantageous to them to keep that false appearance up, isn't it? To make, like you say, we demonize the other. That's a very common thing for any government will do that if you wish to have a war.
Yeah, actually, like I've been thinking about this with the war in Ukraine, and thinking about just all the Russian people around the world, and it's not just Ukraine, it's like both sides, isn't it? Everybody's suffering. That thought of demonizing one or the other just brings untold suffering.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And again, for me, Eddie, I think my sisters, my brothers, my friends, the people that I worship with, they can be different from me.
Yeah.
But most people are not just different from me. Most people are other than me. Not just the people I don't disagree with, all of those strangers. All of those strangers are just other.
Other. Yeah, and so if we look at how we appreciate the other when we look at them like that, how is that? Like it's with indifference, we just don't care.
Or even it's a bit more, it's we go other, and in our mind we're thinking, and I would never be like that. So there's this real separation.
Yeah.
And I mean, my test for myself is to think how I am the same with, just pick a politician, any politician. then then it's really at the coalface, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, then we see ourselves being prejudiced again. And so now we'll move on to the second point from the point of view of others. And I'll just put this one up. So here we can say, because you and I equally desire happiness, there is no need to discriminate between us. So from His Holiness's book, Path to Bliss, he says, reflect that all sentient beings equally desire happiness, and therefore there is no ground for discriminating between them when working for their benefit. The situation is analogous to one where you encounter 10 equally wretched beggars who are desperately asking you to relieve their hunger. In such circumstances, it makes no sense to have any feeling of preference. again from His Holiness's book In Praise of Great Compassion, he says, favoring some beggars over others is not suitable because each of them has needs, although their specific needs may differ. In the same way, we and others equally have needs and desires, although our specifics may differ. Therefore, it's not right to be partial to our friends over enemies or to favor ourselves over others. Instead, we should aim to benefit everyone equally. I found this a terrific thing to remember, which stops me hurting others. Because, like I said, one of the, you've got two really strong driving forces. One is we don't want to experience suffering, and the other is we're not content with the happiness we have, right? So we always want more. And of course, the more is about like me. And as we point out, the happiness you want to get is from the other. But then oftentimes, when you try to do something with the other to increase your happiness, if you think about it, you're going, are you actually adding to their happiness? Or could their happiness be decreased from what you're about to do, what you want to do? And if you can sort of sit there and go, wow, I'm not really certain at all that will actually add to their happiness. And in fact, it could well add to their suffering. And so then it's like, whoa, I could say you have to pause, don't you? Because you're remembering, no, actually, the happiness I'm seeking, they're seeking happiness too. So if I go and do what I sort of would like to do, for a little while I'll be happy, and for a little while they might be too. In fact, there's this lovely lyric, it says, which I've got in there, it goes, after the laughter, the tears. So it's a great song too. It's a song from the early 60s, and when the woman sings it, you get it, because this goes, yeah, I've had a great time, and now look what happened. After the laughter, the tears. So when you go to your side, if you're laughing, is the other side laughing? Are they happy too? Does the happiness sort of continue? So this is nice, like I said, keep checking. You want to be happy, will they be? There's another thing that's not said here yet, it might be said later on. So we have one person here, and like Michael's saying, the other is immense, isn't it? The other is numberless, countless beings. And our happiness is just one for me.
So, Eddie, this from the point of view of others, one about the beggars, in a way, it's like there are some people that are obviously suffering and need our help, but like Rinpoche's often said, there's not just the poor ones but the rich ones as well. So the rich ones are impoverished in a different way, impoverished in the heart or in a feeling of safety, and have to be bullies and everything. So kind of seeing how everybody is impoverished might be different on the surface, but underneath there's that really deep need.
Yeah, and this is what we're getting at, like beneath the surface. And like I said before, we can ask anybody, do you want to be happy? The feelings of happiness you presently experience, are they enough for you? And I'm sure most of us go like, no.
And
no, I'd
see,
like more.
this one, like, it's for you, you said it stops you harming others. For me, it stops me hating others, because say I look at someone like Trump and I think, well, even though I might disagree with a whole lot of what he's doing, clearly he's just like me and he wants to be happy, and he doesn't have happiness. He has suffering, and that's like that. We're the same. And then I go, oh my God, no, we're not. Then I go, yes, we are.
Yeah, so these meditations, they will really challenge this idea of self and other being completely different, like blue and yellow. two different colors. You can't make yellow blue and blue can't become yellow, right? And that's how we're sort of looking at ourselves. We're different. I'm blue, you're the yellow one, you're the other.
Yes, but I have to say, for the good of the, in my opinion, for the good of the planet, for what you said, Nifty, that I don't hate him. I don't hate him. I don't wish ill on him, but I sure wish somebody would put him in jail.
Yeah, well, actually, Eddie said the thing about how if we have this equanimity, then our thought naturally goes to how can we best benefit them. So it might be a whole range of things, but then we're working from a totally different point of view than just that really basic instinct of just, shut up and get out of my face, but actually working to change the situation.
So when we talk about, as you also know, it's from the point of view of others, it's coming from the point of view of conventional truth. So we look at conventional truth, we have the appearances. That's what these conventional truths are. They're the appearances. And so that's, like I said, it's the surface. And but we sort of believe in the surface. We've got our ideas about the surface, and we think what we're thinking is true. Well, in fact, we need to go and be beneath the surface, which is also a conventional truth. It's also true that Donald Trump wants to be happy, just like we do.
And Alicia's just said that putting him in jail might be motivated by, for instance, protecting him from himself. Yeah. So it really does come down to the motivation, even how we think about it. It's really vastly different.
Okay, let's have a look at the third point. So you can see this is sort of similar to the other, but it's just taking the other side. So we are the same in that we equally lack genuine happiness. And we are the same in that, having suffering, we wish to be free of it. So here, something that might help us here is this idea of genuine happiness. So we could look at, we need to ask ourselves again, what do we mean by happiness? And is there more than just one type of happiness? So we have the ordinary types of happiness that we experience, which in terms of categories is called the suffering of change. Where our ordinary happiness, because it is so dependent upon other, we don't have control over it. So it's definitely going to change. And we know that if we have too much of a good thing, we suffer. And if we don't have enough of the good thing, we suffer. And then if we actually have the good thing actually changes. Right? So we've got a problem again. And that's the normal, what we call ordinary happiness, right? That everybody on the planet sort of basically experiences. So when we talk about like genuine happiness, it's got to be, well, that can't take place, right? The happiness we experience has to be like stable. Like it can't turn into suffering. You go, okay, so, well, how would that be? How could genuine happiness exist? And my answer to this is, well, you just remove all the causes of suffering. And then your happiness is stable. So that's what we sort of, we're always going for that, isn't it? We're sort of happiness where we don't need to do it again or try something new or have more of it. Maybe it was just like, wow, that's it. I've done it. Like, there it is. So one of that type of happiness is sort of about like genuine true cessations, where the causes for suffering have vanished, and we're just bringing us back to the original nature of the mind, without the afflictions. So we are the same, that we equally lack a genuine happiness. This is true. We can check this. And we are the same, that having suffering, we wish to be free of it. And that's also true. Again, from Path to Bliss, His Holiness says, develop an equanimity based on the reflection that all sentient beings are equal in lacking genuine happiness, although they have the innate desire to possess it. Likewise, all sentient beings are the same in having suffering and the wish to avoid it. If there are 10 patients equally suffering a serious illness, there is no justification for a doctor to discriminate when treating them. In the same way, there is no moral justification for us to be biased when helping others to relieve their suffering. In Praise of Great Compassion, His Holiness goes on to say that curing the suffering of some patients and not others is not proper. Although each one suffers from a different illness or injury, they all equally want to be free from pain. Therefore, we should try to remove suffering from everyone equally, without sort of helping ourselves and neglecting others. So here's the sort of conclusion of going through these 3 points. As you can see, as we've gone through it, there's no rational basis, is there, to just focus on ourselves and neglect others. As there's no rational basis at all for me to be biased towards any sentient being, there are no grounds for neglecting the welfare of a sentient being. Because we don't neglect ourselves, do we? Like we try and do the best to be happy and to have no suffering. So this is the interesting one, I think. I shall care as deeply for you as I care for myself. So this is the sort of like the switch we have to make, because at present we care very deeply about ourselves, but nowhere near as deeply about others. But if we're the same, then the depth of our care should be the same, shouldn't it? Should be equal. So I'll just say a little bit now from His Holiness again, from his book In Praise of Great Compassion, and this is from page 118. It says,
stop the share, hun.
I didn't want to then. I wanted to sort of keep it on here so they could hold this thing here. If you
okay, sorry.
If our happiness and misery were unrelated to others, it would be reasonable to say that we do not need to bother about their joy and pain. But that's not the case. Our happiness and suffering do not arise in isolation. They are interwoven with those of others. So because we are interconnected in this way, caring more about others' happiness, helping them attain it, and eliminating their suffering are crucial even for our own well-being. The problem with caring only about the safety and well-being of ourselves and the people we care for is that we will live in a society where most people are miserable. They will make their suffering and unfair treatment known to us. And then all of us will live in a tumultuous society, which is going on all the time, isn't it? That's exactly how it is now. So caring for others as we care for ourselves will easily remedy that. So again, so he says, you train your mind in the attitude expressed as follows: I will never discriminate between beings and will always work equally to help them overcome suffering and gain happiness.
So, Eddie, is this like how we see in some of those really small Pacific nations, that are suffering now under climate change and the water rising, and so they're all working for everybody in their nation, whether they know them or not. They're caring for each other equally because they really have, like, that automatic recognition of equality, at least within themselves in that community, regardless of whether they know each other personally.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yep. So the suffering that they are experiencing with the rising of the tides and so forth. So you can ask yourself, is that unrelated to us here in Australia, or in particular New Zealand and Australia, because they're pretty close to that? Is that completely unrelated to us so that we don't have to worry about it at all? We don't have to care about it at all. And you'd have to say, well, no, because if those islands are flooded, where are those people going to go? Then they're going to come here, aren't they? Right? They're going to come here. We're the closest people there are. And I was just thinking, as I was reading through this, wow, this is like the history arc, the arc of history, you know, when the imperialist countries who are about empire, you know, Great Britain in particular, but France, many countries. So what did they do? They left their shores, they went to other countries and they took all the resources, they took the people, they took the slaves, and they used them, right, for their own benefit. And here we are 200 or 300 years later, and we've taken so many resources away from them. Now they're looking for better places to live. Where are they going to go? Well, to the people who took the resources. And you know, most of those countries are all up in arms, isn't it? We don't want immigration, we don't want this, we don't want that. As well, yeah, this is the consequence. This is the consequence. We just put yourself first and go other. Like, no, I don't care. We are already interrelated. And it's when you forget that or deny it, all these problems are going to arise. And one of the deepest ways of our interrelationship is that our sameness in wishing to be happy, wishing to avoid suffering. So, Riffy, you wanted to say something?
Alicia's just put into the chat, sometimes I think if we all cared for self and others equally, there'd be 8 billion people caring for everyone.
Oh.
But if we only care for ourselves, there's only one person caring for everyone. So by the numbers, very, very well spotted right there.
And the great thing is, Alicia, to make that sort of change, we don't even need everyone. We don't need, I think it's 10%. 1 in 10 people who do it is enough to make this massive change. Yeah. So I'll go back now to the screen. Like I said, this is the deep thing. I will care as deeply for you as I care about myself. I remember when this sort of dawned on me, when you go through the points, it's like, I was very shocked, you know, because this is that's like, oh my God, this is what it means for me. You know, it's like, you can't be so self-centered and self-obsessive anymore. It's, it doesn't hold up. You know, I think this is great. You know, like it gets down deep inside us. We will do this, and our lives will be so much better. So now we go to the next section, I think, and this one is the one where sort of from our own point of view. And again, like I said, we've got these 3 points and then a conclusion. So from our own point of view, the first part. So here we're focused on the attitudes. So before I put this up, maybe so this section here, there's 2 sort of ways of looking at this. What's really being presented here is like over time. And the time, of course, that the Buddhists frequently put forward is beginningless time. Since time without beginning, since rebirth without beginning. So that's the arc, the natural arc of this presentation. However, you might not believe in past and future lives. You're not quite convinced yet, or you live it. Well, it's possible. You might think, you know. So you can look at, okay, then I've got to look at it from the arc of this life, and what can I draw from that, and then move it along to other lives. And so these three parts here, from your own point of view, are necessary because of a way that we have of thinking. So as Holiness says, you might have the thought that although reflection upon the equality of others is persuasive regarding the futility of your being discriminatory towards other beings, surely when viewed from your own side, the situation will look quite different. After all, some people are friends and help you, whereas many others harm you. To counter this thought, which attempts to give false grounds for being partial towards others, reflect that all sentient beings are equally kind to you. They have been at one time or another your closest friends and relatives. Therefore, there's no rational basis at all for being biased towards or against any. So we start with this: all sentient beings are equally kind to me, and they've all at one time or another been my closest friends and relatives. Now, so the other night, so I was reading, trying to study as much as I can about equanimity, and I have a book called Bodhicitta by Venerable Losang Gyatso, and that was one of the books I suggested for reading. And in it is just this one sentence, and it just really sort of rocked me, and it was like, well, of course, And I thought, wow, that's so powerful. This is one sentence. This is a one sentence like meditation, like that got in. And he said that if you understand beginningless rebirth, equanimity is easy. So just, I was like, like that. So I sort of nodding and going, and then I'm going sort of like beginningless rebirth. So you've got two choices: there's a beginning, or it's the opposite. If we go, no, look, it's beginningless, you must be joking. I can't get my head around that. I get beginning. And you go, okay, if you say beginning, you have to realize that when something begins, there's nothing before it. That's what we say, a beginning. There's something like this begins, and then there's nothing before it. So it starts off like that. And like beginningless means actually we can't posit a beginning. Because if you do, then you have this problem that arises, which is an effect arising without a cause. And effects can't arise without causes. They need causes. So the idea of a beginning or an effect and then going on doesn't make any sense. Right? So it's got to be, you go, oh, well, I'm not really familiar with this idea of beginninglessness, but I can see it makes more sense to me than having the idea of an effect without a cause. Effects without causes, no one's going to agree with that. That doesn't make sense at all. So all we're saying is we cannot find the first cause of anything. So it's beginningless cause effect, cause effect, cause effect. So if it's like that, and then you take it through like lifetimes, it's like, that means like, and nothing being stable in it all. All of it's subject to change. It's not under our control. That's just, I think it just follows naturally. You've got to go, God, I could have been a man, a woman, a child, an animal, a human. The effect is so large, but so is the time frame. So we've got two things there. One is like the idea of you've got to refute the idea of a beginning, and then go, well, hang on a minute, but don't we die? And isn't that the end of us? It's like we've come to an end, right? There's no, that's it. So I can't have lots and lots of lifetimes. So you've got to go, okay, so this beginningless proposition is dependent upon the mind. Right? It's the mind, a particular type of mind that has no beginning. But now somebody's saying it has an end. It can actually stop, and it stops at death. And after death, there is nothing. So you're going to have to go, okay, now I need to refute that idea. What is something that would actually stop this consciousness that I'm agreeing to being beginningless?
But
So
Eddie, I have a question on that.
Sure.
On that very thing. Let me think. What if it's like, let's say sometime in the future and the sun burns out and the planet Earth has no more humans?
Yep.
Maybe they went somewhere else, maybe they didn't, maybe they just became extinct. What would happen to the mind stream? I mean, where would it still exist? Where would it be? Where would it go?
Yeah. So then I would say either you could go to the form or formless realms, or we couldn't be sure where it would go. But the thing to ask yourself is like, with the deaths of all human beings, if the planet Earth was suddenly to no longer exist, would this mean that consciousness no longer existed?
Mm.
And then you'd have to go, no, not necessarily.
And also there are multiple other planets.
So the thing that I thought about this was I was thinking, it's my mind is going towards, it's either this way or that way. It's either has a beginning or it doesn't. It has an end or it doesn't. But actually, there are some things that have beginnings and endings, and some things that have beginnings and no endings, and some things that have no beginnings and endings, and some things that have no beginnings and no endings. So there's 4 possibilities there. And you can actually go through them and say, well, here's a type of consciousness that has a beginning and an ending. Here's a type of consciousness that has no beginning and an ending. Here's a type of consciousness that has no beginning and no end, and so forth. You go through all 4 and get possibilities for each one. So I found that myself very useful, when we talk about beginningless consciousness or endless consciousness that does not end. Because like I said, people go, no. And you say, so what type of consciousness are you talking about that will come to an end or that will have a beginning? Because I think many times we make this assumption that we're talking about the same thing, when in fact we might not be. And especially if you're talking to non-Buddhists, you can be very assured you won't be talking about the same thing many times.
So, Eddie, Corey Jackson talks about this as the conservation of consciousness. So that's really similar to the conservation of energy. So while we've got, physical forms that come into existence and disintegrate, clearly have beginnings and ends, on a atomic level, there is this conservation of energy. And so the same thing with consciousness, a conservation of consciousness. You can't make more of it or have less of it.
Yeah, that's right. It's a nice term, isn't it? Conservation of consciousness. And you have to ask yourself, what type of consciousness?
And that makes it much clearer. Just like we go, well, what kind of physical form, subtle form, or But Eddie, also what you're saying about this, then it's actually quite sobering, because once you start kind of putting all of these building blocks of analysis into play, then it's like it's quite embarrassing to have so much bias or favoritism. It's really sobering. How can we?
So I say another thing too. So what we're talking about is quite advanced practice. So in a way, so something advanced has to have a foundation beneath it, and of course there is, but for us, oftentimes we forget the foundation points. You know, so it's just, so over time we could recollect them more often, and then we can put all the jigsaw pieces together, and then we go, oh, okay. Because I find a lot of these statements and so forth great to sort of intellectually oppose, to open them up to questions, you know, to try and shoot yourself down in a way, and then go, well, I can't, so I accept it. So all sentient beings are equally kind to me. So like I said, so one of the things you'd say, well, yeah, they could also be equally unkind to me. If you're looking at the huge overall arc of beginningless time, you know, and you go, well, is that true? You know, and sort of have a look at it. And of course, if we've had this beginningless rebirth and this whole, the arc of time, then you're going to find, well, then we've been related to each other in all sorts of different ways. In fact, I think in Geshe Thupten Loden's book, there's one again, it was just this one sentence in there that sort of, you know, really rocked me. And it was this sort of thing where he says something like that there's nothing stable at all in terms of your experience, nothing whatsoever. And if you look at that in your own life, in this life, you'll see that's the case, isn't it? So you go, okay, it's been like that in this life. We talk about other lives, it's going to be the same there. This goes on and on. We take one and say it's 100 times. It's not the same. It's going to change. So people who are once your closest friends and your relatives will become your worst enemies, will become strangers, and they'll change again and again and again and again. But here, because we're trying to develop something called this equanimity, you could say, well, over the arc of time, wow, these categories, they're not stable. You know, I'm just imputing the words on, like friend, over a short block of time, like when they did some kind things to me, when I appreciate it, when I saw it. But in fact, later on, it changes again. But like I'm saying, this type of thing here is we're really trying to go, okay, if I look at it this way, what's the benefit to me? If I look at it and say, well, all sentient beings have equally been unkind to me, now what's going to happen? Just check your mind and go, Jesus, now I'm paranoid. Now I'm scared of everyone. Now I've got a lot of worries. Right? It might be true over the huge arc of time, but that's not what you want to be thinking of. Yeah? But it's also, you know, alternatively true that have been equally kind to me. So this is one way. This is the first point. The second point, the kindness of sentient beings is not confined to when they are friends and relatives alone. The kindness when they are enemies is unestimable. Now, this is very true when you have a way of thinking about it, a good, disciplined way of thinking about it. Because if you don't, you will not see the kindness of enemies or kindness of hurtful beings actually as kindness. Right? You'll actually see it as hurting. You'll see these people as being enemies. So His Holiness says, you know, it's like Gandhi says, but sentient beings have also harmed us. Harps the self-centered attitude. If we were to weigh the help and harm we have received, the help we have received from others greatly outweighs the harm. In fact, the harm is minuscule. In addition, when we were harmed, many sentient beings came to our aid. But our self-centered mind keeps tabs on and seldom forgets even the slightest harm we have received, while it takes for granted every benefit we have received and expects more. If we'll take stock of our lives, we'll see how true this is. His Holiness is in path to bliss. Perhaps you have the idea that although people have been your friends in the past, they've equally been your enemies and have caused harm as well. That certainly popped up into my mind straight away. Such notions should be countered by reflecting that sentient beings' kindness to you is not confined to when they are friends and relatives alone. The kindness, when they are your enemies, is without bound. The enemy provides you with a precious opportunity to train yourself in the noble ideals of patience and tolerance, traits which are vital for the perfection of your generation of universal compassion and bodhicitta. For a bodhisattva who is emphasizing the practice of the mind of enlightenment, the training in patience is indispensable. Contemplating upon such lines of reasoning will persuade you that there are no grounds for neglecting the welfare of even a single sentient being. So just as a quick exercise, so there's only a few of us here, just think, take a neutral sentient being. They're not harming you and they are not helping you or your friends directly. How can you think of them as, in a kind way? Then move it across to enemies. Take this person who I now call an enemy. In what way is being an enemy? In what way is being nasty to me and doing these things and hurting people a kindness? And then you can move it over to the friends, and that's a very simple one, is that when with the friends you can very quickly find ways that they were kind to you. But if you can just take a little bit of time and think about the other categories, and so you can draw on your own mind, it is kindness. So one of the things that I often think of is this also really helped me a lot. Well, sometimes I'd be sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus to come, and then a person would walk on the other side of the road, and they were a stranger to me. I didn't know who they were. So I look at them, and generally, you just look at them and you don't think anything of them. Nothing's thought about them. But then I thought, well, they haven't thrown a stone at me. That's a kindness. So many times it's like what they don't do that might harm you. They don't intend. There's no intention, but like I said, it doesn't require intention. It's a kindness.
This is, Eddie, what I think about being a pedestrian, the fact that most of the cars, most of the time, all abide by the road rules and stop for pedestrians, and you can have a genuine, general sense of ease just moseying about as a pedestrian is actually like a continuous kindness.
Yeah, that's right. Because we know that sometimes they don't.
That's right. And then that's the thing that stands out. But most of the time, everybody's baseline is to try and be a good driver and look out for people. That's like the majority, which is, it's kind of like the proof of the baseline of human of nature is, is good. The other thing that I've really found incredibly beneficial about this, because I find this so confronting, but this year I've really been trying to figure out actually what is a friend, and going from a friend of just being someone that you like being with because it's fun, actually that may not be very beneficial at all. You might say be just poking fun at people all the time or being quite mean and sarcastic. And then I'm thinking, okay, so then a friend is someone who benefits you. And so then I started thinking, well, is it necessary that I enjoy that benefit is pleasant, or maybe it's really beneficial, but getting there is a bit unpleasant. So then I can genuinely see how people that fall into the category of enemies, of like who I'm really hurt by, if I do the work in my mind, it changes things, and it benefits me, and I change systems and processes, and create new causes, and also there's a huge amount of benefit that comes from it. It's just the initial bit wasn't pleasant. And if that's my category for whether I'm benefiting, a friend or not, that's really fickle.
Yeah, but it's not go to the dentist or the doctor. As well as it is.
Yeah. So
They're helping. It's not all that pleasant, but they mean well.
yeah. So then the criteria for if someone's a friend, I suppose, then is if you benefit, and then you can go, well, I can benefit from everybody if I
So,
just put in the effort. So
yeah,
that
that's
so
right.
then it's just different types of friends, ones that you'd trust with your life and others that you wouldn't trust with your life, but you still benefit from them all.
And like I said, the benefit um, doesn't require it to be unpleasant. You know.
Or pleasant.
Yeah.
Or even have a motivation. Because I remember one year you said to me about, if I found $20 on the ground, and I go, woohoo, I got $20. Does it matter that whoever dropped the $20 meant for me to have it? No, I benefit either way.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether they meant to harm or help, or whether they even knew. The fact is, I'm still getting the benefit of $20 in my pocket.
Yeah. And you can see with that example that the benefit really requires the mind, how you use the mind. That's determining benefit. Let's come to the third point of view. So this is a familiar sight. So I'll put this up. We're all subject to suffering and impermanence. So here, His Holiness says, in praise of great compassion, this is on page 121, it says, if we still cling to old hurts and indulge our resentment, then recall that we and others are impermanent beings who are subject to death. In that light, there is no sense in discriminating against anyone, holding grudges or seeking revenge. Such attitudes only make us miserable and create the cause for suffering in future lives. Furthermore, the beings we seek to harm, in return to harm, are caught in cyclic existence, just like us. Given that they are going to die in any case, what use is harming them? So Miffy and I went off last night and we saw the movie Wakanda, this Black Panther thing. So we were watching, I was really struck by how, the presentation of how when people are grieving, they don't make very good decisions. And also when they're angry, they make very poor decisions too. And you could really see so obviously these bad decisions made that just do all this suffering. Like people who cared about one person were quite willing to hurt hundreds of people. And then the other person who was in charge of looking after these hundreds of people was quite willing to hurt thousands of people. Like it just went backwards and forwards. I was sitting there going, wow, this doesn't make any sense, does it? Like this is not useful. This is not a way to be. And so they had the revenge, the resentment, driving these really unskillful actions.
And by the way, just as a plug for the movie, it was great because it brought you through the whole process. Uh, it didn't kind of smooth it all out in a Disneyfied fashion. It actually was quite emotionally confronting like that, because it just became apparent how this attitude doesn't work.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. It really showed like everybody's suffering, but how their response to suffering was very unskillful. Because they did what they did to others what they didn't like being done to themselves. And so there you see, that no equanimity there, no sense that, wow, we're the same. So Shantideva wrote in his Bodhisattva's Life, there's no sense in someone who is himself subject to suffering and impermanence being selfish and discriminatory towards others who are also tormented by the same fate. For example, it would be quite senseless and stupid for 10 convicted criminals who are all sentenced for execution within a short time to argue amongst themselves if their days are numbered. So I think, did somebody have their hand up or raised something? You know. So let's go to the conclusion. Let's have a look at what we have in conclusion. Yeah, this is so true, isn't it? I mean, you just think, let's just be kind to one another. Our time is limited here. We don't know how long we'll ever be here. We come and go in a flash. Let's make it terrible for ourselves, eh? Let's give ourselves a hard time while we're here. Like, gee. So in conclusion, let's have a look. Because I cannot distinguish between our desires. Our desires are the same, wishing to be happy, wishing to be free from suffering. I choose to never be intolerant of your happiness, and I choose to help you overcome your suffering as I do my own.
So Eddie, just on that previous point, it's like how when someone's on their deathbed, that's kind of where it's easier for us to forgive them, isn't it? It's not when we pick a fight and go, you know, that time you never made me that dinner when you said you would. It's like it's much easier to release it all. Yeah. So it's just because we just think some of us are on a deathbed and others aren't.
Oh, we're all in the bed.
Yeah.
We're all in the bed. That's right. So why not do it as soon as possible? Why not get rid of our suffering as soon as possible, saying like sorry, or not holding on to our resentments and crazy ideas. So in summary here, I've put it up like this. So this was a train, and these people weren't allowed to ride on this particular train. So what they all did was they all got these masks. You can see them, they're like all piggy masks, and they all wore them. I think this was in the late 50s or maybe very early 60s. And then, so they got on the train, and eventually they were allowed to have this type of train.
So you missed the main point. It was a goods train, and it was only allowed to take livestock. And everyone's like, what about the people?
So they wanted to have the same sort of train. Yeah. So here we go. This is this lovely, to me, a way of summing it all up. So you just think, well, everyone equally wants to avoid suffering. Everyone equally wishes to be happy. Everyone equally lacks happiness. The causes of suffering can actually be eliminated. And here's something a little bit different, but we can look at this in the next week's classes. This potential for complete happiness can actually be actualized. So what we want can actually be achieved. And that is the same right across the board. It says everyone equally wants to avoid suffering. To avoid suffering, you have to just eliminate the causes of it. Everyone equally wishes to be happy. Well, the potential for that complete happiness is already present. Everyone equally lacks happiness. Is going to everyone, not everyone here, but most people don't know about how to actually be happy. So we've got 5 points. I always like these first three. Everyone wants to avoid suffering, wants to be happy, but they're not. Everyone lacks that type of happiness. to actually have firm, stable, long-lasting happiness, what we've got to do is eliminate the causes of suffering. And that's possible because it's a dependent arising, depends upon conditions, mainly conditioning. And where are we going to experience this complete happiness? Well, in the mind. The mind is going to have no causes for suffering and have everything that produces the happiness is arisen. So this way, this last one's really pointing out that what we call Buddha nature, the potential. Everyone equally has this potential. Whether everyone can equally access it or not, that's a different story. But we have the potential. It's just the nature of mind. Now, the potential for complete happiness can be actualized because the mind we possess is clear, knowing, and empty of inherent nature. And this is called the Buddha nature. The mind's lack of inherent nature is called Buddha nature. And in brief, it's the natural potential of the mind to be fully cognizant and free of its adventitious defilements, which are the causes of suffering. Yeah, we'll touch on that next week, and I hope I'll see you all again, and we'll do it again next week. So what's our takeaway for today? Well, you know at least something about equanimity meditation or equalizing self and others, especially as it relates to others and ourselves. Yeah, from the point of view of oneself and from the point of view of others. And next week, equanimity from the ultimate point of view and equanimity from the tantric perspectives. So are there any final questions that anybody would like to ask? Is there, or ideas that people would like to share? Okay, well, just take the merit that we've gathered through listening, reflecting. So I see many of you reflecting on this, and possibly meditating on it, becoming really familiar with it. Let's take this merit, which is a dependent arising, and because it's dependent, it's empty of any intrinsic nature, which is wonderful because it now can cause and produce results. So we'll take this and we'll dedicate it. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. And as long as space endures, and as long as sentient beings abide, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. Okay, another Monday morning finished, Monday night maybe, or Sunday, I'm not sure. It's all dependent, isn't it? So thank you once again, lovely people, and let's see each other again next week, and we keep on learning about equanimity and trying to put it into practice and be useful human beings. So thank you and see you again.